The scent of old paper and dust filled the air as I sat in my parents' cluttered home office, surrounded by stacks of documents that chronicled their lives. The house, nestled in a quiet Seattle suburb, was filled with memories both warm and increasingly bittersweet. I was here to help them sort through years of accumulated tax forms, warranties, and junk mail, a task I'd taken on every fall for as long as I could remember. As I flipped through the pile, my fingers paused over an envelope that seemed out of place. It was labeled Last Will and Testament. A chill ran down my spine as I hesitated, knowing that this wasn't something to be taken lightly. Curiosity won out, and I carefully opened the envelope, my heart pounding in my chest. The words on the page hit me like a physical blow. Everything, every last dollar, every inch of the house, every piece of my parents' assets was left to my sister Olivia. There was no mention of me, no acknowledgement of the years I'd spent supporting them both emotionally and financially. I read the document again and again, hoping I'd missed something, but the truth was stark and unyielding. I felt a wave of nausea as the reality of my situation sank in. How could they do this to me? I'd always been the reliable one, the daughter who stepped up when things got tough. I'd helped pay the mortgage when dad's back went out, deliver groceries after mom's surgery, and walk them through countless online banking sessions. Yet here I was, erased from their future plans as if I'd never existed. Dad walked into the room, sipping from his favorite mug, oblivious to the storm raging inside me. "Find the tax docs yet?" he asked, his voice casual and unconcerned. I managed a tight smile, my face feeling like it might crack from the effort. "Not yet," I replied, my voice steady despite the turmoil within. I couldn't confront him then. The shock was too fresh, the betrayal too raw. I needed time to process, to understand how the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally could cast me aside so callously. As I drove home that evening, the rain pelting against my windshield, I couldn't shake the feeling of being adrift, untethered from the family I thought I knew. Over the next few days, I found myself going through the motions of life, working, eating, sleeping, but it all felt hollow. The betrayal gnawed at me, a constant ache that refused to be ignored. I couldn't help but replay moments from my past, searching for signs of the favoritism that now seemed so glaringly obvious. Olivia had always been the golden child, her charisma and charm drawing people in like moths to a flame. I, on the other hand, was the steady, reliable one, the daughter who never caused trouble, never demanded attention. I'd worn that role like a badge of honor, believing it meant I was respected, valued. Now, I saw it for what it was, a convenient label that allowed my family to take me for granted. The first crack in my composure came a few days later when Mom called, her voice sweet and cajoling. "Hi, honey," she said. "We've hit a little snag this month. Would you be able to send us $1,500 just to cover the utility bills and a couple of other things?" I hesitated, the request echoing in my mind as I recalled the will. But old habits die hard, and I found myself agreeing, transferring the money during my lunch break. That night, as I scrolled through Instagram, I saw a story from Olivia. She was at an upscale spa, robes and wine, and soft lighting, a stark contrast to utility bills she supposedly needed help with. The caption read, "Self-care is the best care. Pre-holiday reset." Anger surged within me as I realized that my hard-earned money was funding her luxuries. I sat in silence, the weight of my family's betrayal pressing down on me. I couldn't ignore it any longer. I had to confront them, to demand an explanation for their actions. But as I picked up my phone, my resolve wavered. What if they denied it all, gaslit me into believing I was overreacting? The thought was paralyzing, but I knew I couldn't stay silent forever. The call from Dad came sooner than I expected. I was nursing a cup of lukewarm tea, the rain blurring the window beside me, when his voice filled the line. "About what you saw last weekend," he began, his tone too even, too rehearsed, right? I braced myself for the excuses, the justifications that would inevitably follow. "It's more complicated than you think," he said, as if that could somehow erase the pain he'd caused. "Your mother and I thought it was best for Olivia. She's had a harder time, you know. You've always been strong, independent." His words were like a knife twisting in my gut. So this was their justification, that Olivia needed it more, that my strength and independence negated my worth in their eyes. I pressed the phone tighter against my ear, my jaw clenched so hard it ached. "That's your justification?" I asked, my voice calm despite the storm raging inside me. "It's not about love, Dad. You can't claim to love someone and then treat them like they're disposable." He sighed. as if my pain was an inconvenience. You're being dramatic, Emma. It's just a will. You act like it's some kind of betrayal. I almost laughed, but the sound would have come out wrong, too bitter, too broken. You don't get to rewrite the narrative just because it's comfortable for you, I said, my voice steady despite the tears threatening to spill over. We're done here. As I hung up the phone, a sense of finality washed over me. I was no longer the dutiful daughter, the reliable one who never complained. I was a stranger in my own story, betrayed by the people who were supposed to love me the most. But in that moment of clarity, I knew one thing for certain: I wouldn't stay silent any longer. I would fight back, reclaim my voice, and demand the respect I deserved. The days that followed my confrontation with Dad were a blur of disbelief and anger. I found myself questioning everything I thought I knew about my family, replaying memories in my mind, like old home movies, searching for clues I might have missed. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that the signs had always been there, hiding in plain sight. I remembered the countless times Olivia had been praised for her mediocre achievements while my own were brushed aside. The way Mom would gush over Olivia's every accomplishment, no matter how small, while my successes were met with a nod and a quick change of subject. I'd always told myself that it was because Olivia needed the encouragement more than I did, that my strength lay in my ability to stand on my own. But now I saw it for what it was: favoritism, pure and simple. One evening, as I sat alone in my apartment, a photo on the bookshelf caught my eye. It was a picture of Olivia and me as kids, matching dresses and arms around each other. The glass frame had a tiny crack in the top corner, a flaw I'd meant to fix but never got around to. As I stared at the photo, I felt a pang of longing for the simplicity of those days when our bond was uncomplicated and pure. But the truth was, our dynamic had never been as simple as it seemed. Even as children, Olivia had always been the center of attention, the one who commanded the room with her charm and charisma. I, on the other hand, had been content to fade into the background, the reliable sister who never caused trouble. It was a role I'd embraced, believing it made me strong, independent. Now, I saw that it had only made me invisible. As I delved deeper into my memories, I began to notice patterns that had been there all along. The way Dad would always side with Olivia in our childhood arguments, no matter how petty. The way Mom would dismiss my concerns, brushing them off as overreactions or exaggerations. It was as if my feelings, my experiences were less valid than Olivia's, less worthy of acknowledgement. The more I thought about it, the angrier I became. How could I have been so blind, so willing to accept the crumbs of affection they threw my way? I'd always prided myself on my independence, my ability to stand on my own 2 feet. But now I saw that my so-called strength was just another way for them to take advantage of me, to use me as a convenient scapegoat for their own shortcomings. I found myself obsessively checking my bank statements, tracing the trail of money that had been siphoned from my accounts without my knowledge. The betrayal cut deep, a physical ache that refused to be ignored. I'd always been careful with my finances, saving and investing wisely, believing that my hard work would one day pay off. But now I saw that my careful planning had only made me an easy target, a convenient source of funds for my family's whims. As the days turned into weeks, I found myself withdrawing from my usual social circles, canceling plans with friends, and avoiding family gatherings. I couldn't bear the thought of facing them, of pretending that everything was okay when my world was crumbling around me. I felt like a fraud, a stranger in my own life, and I didn't know how to reconcile the person I thought I was with the reality that had been forced upon me. It was during one of these lonely evenings that I received a call from Alex, my best friend since college. Alex had always been a steadfast presence in my life, a voice of reason and support in times of crisis. As I poured out my heart to him, I felt a glimmer of hope, a spark of determination that had been missing in the days since my discovery. "You can't let them get away with this, Emma," Alex said, his voice firm and unyielding. "You deserve better than this. You deserve to be seen, to be valued for who you are, not just what you can do for them." His words struck a chord deep within me, resonating with a truth I'd been too afraid to acknowledge. I spent my entire life trying to live up to their expectations, to be the perfect daughter, the reliable sister. But in doing so, I'd lost sight of my own worth, my own desires and dreams. It was time to take control of my life, to stand up for myself and demand the respect I deserve. With Alex's encouragement, I began to take steps towards reclaiming my identity. I started by setting boundaries, refusing to be their financial crutch any longer. I changed my bank account passwords, closed the joint accounts I'd shared with my parents, and began to monitor my statements more closely, determined to protect what was mine. But setting boundaries was only the first step. I knew that if I wanted to truly reclaim my power, I would have to confront the lies and manipulations that had defined my relationship with my family. I would have to speak my truth, no matter how painful or uncomfortable it might be. And so, with a deep breath and a steadfast resolve, I prepared to take the next step in my journey towards healing and self discovery. The decision to take control of my life didn't come easily. It was a slow, painful process of acknowledging the depth of my family's betrayal and finding the strength to stand up for myself. But with each boundary I set, each truth I acknowledged, I felt a growing sense of empowerment. I was no longer the silent, compliant daughter. I was a woman on a mission to reclaim her identity and self worth. The first step in my journey towards reclamation was seeking legal advice. I needed to understand my rights and protect myself from further financial exploitation. I found a lawyer, Ms. Thompson, who specialized in estate law and had a reputation for being tough and fair. Our initial consultation was a revelation. She listened to my story with empathy and outrage, validating my feelings and assuring me that I had a strong case. With Ms. Thompson's guidance, I began the process of contesting the will. It was a daunting task, fraught with legal jargon and emotional landmines, but I was determined to see it through. I gathered evidence of my financial contributions to the family, documented the manipulative behavior I'd endured, and prepared to face my family in court if necessary. As I delved deeper into the legal process, I found solace in sharing my story with others. I turned to social media, creating a blog where I could document my journey and connect with people who had experienced similar betrayals. The response was overwhelming. Strangers from all over the world reached out to share their own stories of familial manipulation and offer words of support and encouragement. Through my blog, I discovered the power of community and the healing that comes from shared experiences. I was no longer alone in my struggle. I was part of a collective voice, standing up against the injustices that had been forced upon us. It was a liberating feeling, one that fueled my determination to keep fighting no matter the cost. But my newfound voice didn't come without consequences. My family, feeling the heat of my public accusations, retaliated with a vengeance. They hired their own lawyers, threatening to sue me for defamation and demanding that I take down my blog. They accused me of airing our dirty laundry in public, of being a disloyal daughter who was only out for herself. Their attempts to silence me only strengthened my resolve. I refused to back down, standing firm in my conviction that the truth needed to be heard. I continued to document my journey, sharing every twist and turn with my growing online community. Their support was a lifeline, a reminder that I was not alone in my fight for justice and self-worth. As the legal battle intensified, so did the emotional toll. There were days when I felt overwhelmed, when the weight of my family's betrayal threatened to crush me. But I refused to let it break me. I channeled my pain into action, using it as fuel to keep fighting, to keep speaking my truth. One of the most challenging aspects of my journey was confronting the lies and manipulations that had defined my relationship with my family. I had to acknowledge the role I'd played in enabling their behavior, the ways in which I'd sacrificed my own needs and desires to keep the peace. It was a painful process of self-reflection, but it was necessary for my healing and growth. Through it all, Alex remained a steadfast presence in my life, offering unwavering support and encouragement. He reminded me of my worth, of my strength, and of my right to stand up for myself. With his help, I began to see myself not as a victim, but as a survivor, a woman who had overcome incredible odds to reclaim her power and voice. As the days turned into weeks and the weeks into months, I found myself standing on the precipice of a new chapter in my life. I was no longer the silent, compliant daughter. I was a warrior fighting for justice and truth. And no matter the outcome of my legal battle, I knew that I had already won the most important fight, the one for my self-worth and identity. With a deep breath and a steadfast resolve, I prepared to face the final chapter of my journey, determined to see it through to the end, no matter the cost. The final phase of my journey was marked by a sense of calm determination. I had weathered the storm of my family's betrayal and emerged stronger, more resilient than I ever thought possible. The legal battle was nearing its conclusion, and while the outcome was uncertain, I found solace in the knowledge that I had fought for what was right, for what was mine. The day of the final hearing arrived, and I stood before the judge, my heart pounding in my chest. Ms. Thompson was by my side, her presence a steady reminder of the strength and courage that had brought me to this moment. As the proceedings unfolded, I felt a strange sense of detachment as if I were observing the scene from afar. The details of the case were laid bare, the manipulations and deceits exposed for all to see. When the judge delivered his verdict, a hush fell over the courtroom. He ruled in my favor, acknowledging the injustice I had endured and granting me a portion of the estate that reflected my contributions and sacrifices. It was a victory, but it was bitter with sweet. The money could never replace the love and respect I had sought from my family, but it was a step towards healing, acknowledgement of my worth. In the days that followed, I found myself reflecting on the journey that had led me to this point. I thought about the girl I had been, the one who had always sought to please, to be the reliable, uncomplaining daughter. I mourned her loss, but I also celebrated the woman I had become, strong, independent, and unafraid to stand up for herself. As I began to rebuild my life, I made a conscious effort to surround myself with people who valued and respected me. I reconnected with old friends, forging deeper, more meaningful relationships. I joined support groups for individuals who had experienced familial betrayal, finding comfort and solidarity in their shared experiences. And I continued to write, to share my story with the world, hoping that it might inspire others to find their own voices, to stand up for themselves and demand the respect they deserved. One evening, as I sat at my laptop, an email notification popped up on my screen. It was from a woman named Sarah who had been following my blog and found inspiration in my journey. She shared her own story of familial manipulation and betrayal and thanked me for giving her the courage to stand up for herself. As I read her words, I felt a profound sense of purpose, a knowing that my experiences, no matter how painful, had not been in vain. With a renewed sense of determination, I decided to take my advocacy a step further. I founded a nonprofit organization dedicated to supporting individuals who had experienced familial betrayal and manipulation. Through workshops, support groups, and educational resources, we aim to empower others to reclaim their voices and assert their worth. The response was overwhelming, a testament to the power of community and the healing that comes from shared experiences. As the organization grew, so did my sense of fulfillment. I found joy in the knowledge that I was making a difference, that my pain had been transformed into a force for good. I no longer defined myself by the betrayals of my past, but by the love and support that surrounded me, by the lives I touched and the voices I amplified. And so I stood on the precipice of a new chapter in my life, one defined not by the expectations and manipulations of others, but by my own desires and dreams. I had reclaimed my identity, my self-worth, and in doing so, I had found a sense of peace and purpose that transcended the pain of my past. I was no longer the forgotten daughter, the reliable one who faded into the background. I was a woman who had fought for her voice, her truth, and her place in the world, and that was enough. In the quiet moments, I still thought about my family, about the love that had been lost and the bonds that had been broken. But I no longer dwelled on the past, on the what ifs and the might have beens. Instead, I focused on the present, on the love and support that surrounded me, and on the future that lay before me, bright and full of promise. For I had learned that healing comes not from the validation of others, but from the love and respect we cultivate within ourselves. And with that knowledge, I stepped forward, ready to embrace the next chapter of my journey, whatever it may bring.